Hey, what is going on, guys? Hope you're having a fantastic Sunday. Welcome to the AV Experience. We're going to have some fun tonight. We're talking about amplifiers, and we've got Dylan, the owner of Buckeye Amps. Dylan, welcome in.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It's going to be fun. We're going to have a great time tonight. Ryan's here with us. Jonathan is not going to be with us tonight. I think he's like trimming his toenails or something.
Yeah, who cares?
No, he's got family stuff he's going to be taking care of tonight. Good to see you guys in the chat. Before we get started tonight, I just want to throw this out. I have a link in the description. The new Spears and Munsell disc just came out, and so I've got a copy of it. They sent it to me, so I'm excited about that. But we're also going to be doing a giveaway because we'll have Spears and Munsell. Yeah. See, I hooked my audience up, brother. So if you want to enter the giveaway, I've got a link to it in the description. You can head over to youthmanreviews.com/giveaway. You can win the Spears and Munsell disc and also a, it says LX1, but you can get in whatever link that you need. They've got 1 meter, 2 meter, 3 meter, I think up to 6 meters. So all you got to do is come down here, log in with your email or social, and then you can enter to win that. And then during the live stream, we'll actually announce the winner. I think that's in 2 weeks. They'll be on the show. So you got 2 weeks to enter that. So we're excited about that and grateful for their partnership. So get that out of the way. So let's talk about amplifiers. So tonight, guys, if you've got questions about amplifiers, even in general, tonight is the night to ask that. Drop it down in the comments, and super chats, of course, are always welcome. Let's just dive right into it. So Dylan, tell us a little bit about who you are and how Buckeye came about.
So everyone, I'm Dylan, owner and founder of Buckeye Amps. I always tell my story that I've been serious in the hobby. Started about 2009, and like a lot of people, started on the AVS forums, just learning. I mean, even my early posting back then, I look back now and kind of cringe of what I didn't know. Yeah. My background is actually, it's in science. It's more biology, and I actually just finished my PhD in immunology. But what came about was a couple of years ago when we had the pandemic and we were on quarantine. Our lab was we were out of lab for about 2 months. And at that time, I was renovating what I call right now it's still my theater room while I'm building a new one. But I was renovating my theater room and kind of playing with different amps, which I had always done since I started this hobby. I could never find an amp that I really liked. And it's not so much, one sounded flat, one sounded this or that. It just never found one that worked the best with my speakers and how loud I played. Mm-hmm. And up until that point, back in 2020, during the quarantine, I had been Class AB. I tried Class D once, maybe 5 or 6 years before that, and it was just a cheap Crown amp for some pro speakers I had, and I hated the sound. And then someone recommended Hypex, and there was a used ATI who makes Hypex amps on the AVS forums that I decided to give a try, and I heard it, and I loved it, but the price tag was too hard to swallow. They're pretty expensive amps. Okay. So then I realized, I went to the DIY community. I was like, oh, you can build your own. And I was like, that sounds fun. So I built my own Hypex amps. And maybe because I had built them, it had a little bias to it, probably did, but they just worked. They sounded great. They worked. Anytime I sat down and watched a movie, I would never have that thought in my mind, like, is there better amp? I could go through to the used section of AVS and never wonder, oh, look, an amp comes up. Should I try this one? It was just, they worked. And then part of the reason I also built it myself is because when I tried the ATI and then said, all right, this is a little expensive, I can't really justify spending this much money, I looked to see if there was someone in America, US seller that sold Hypex amps, and there was only one. And it didn't seem like that was kind of the priority, just from other comments. I won't get too much into that, but it didn't seem like it'd be a good fit going with them. So I was like, all right, I'll build my own. And then once I built it and kind of got the ins and outs, I just thought, well, this is great for the community. So when I started Buckeye Amps, it was actually tailored. I thought I'd just be doing some kind of custom do-it-yourself builds for customers. And when I first started, it was like maybe 5 or 6 orders the first 2-3 months. And then word of mouth built a little bit. I submitted one a customer had me submit one for review by me or an ASR, and he loved it. And then word of mouth started growing. And what I thought would be maybe just a little extra income while I focused on my immunology career, my science career, in the last year has turned into where it's flip side. Now I'm all in that since I'm done with my PhD, I'm actually all in on this Buckeye Amps and pushing that forward.
Nice.
And we'll revisit sometime in the future if I ever have, employees, if this grows the way it does, where I can have a step back, maybe get back into the science a little bit as like a part-time thing, but it grew. And the word of mouth, the community was the sole reason. And I always appreciate them for that. But it's to the point now where the thing when people used to recommend Buckeye when we started, or when I started, was, I don't know, that's just some guy who builds them in his basement. And now it's, oh, hey, that's Dylan. He builds these amps. You should really give him a try. So I was lucky with the timing and kind of the product, but I've always strived to try and keep the same customer service, the same commitment to the community, and just being engaging and offer the same product for what usually is less than others with the same performance. And that's kind of our formula that works.
Like a high value proposition.
Yeah. I mean, my tagline, I don't have it on the website, but what I kind of tell people is it's audiophile for the masses, because in our audio community, the word audiophile usually brings up terms of like, Macintosh or past like $10,000 amps and fancy looking processors that most people can't afford, where it's, well, no, you can get that same sound or even better for a fraction of the cost.
Yeah. So kind of talking about the cost, like your amps range from like roughly what price to what price?
So the lowest offering is a 2-channel, the Hypex. It's their MP series. It's called, the MP stands for mains powered. So it's a board that has everything all in one, and the power supply and the amplifier module. And a 2-channel for their lower powered one is $575 shipped.
Okay. Wow.
And then our highest one, I mean, if you go to our 8-channel, again, in the mains powered Hypex, but they're higher powered, that does 500 watts per channel. That 8-channel one is, I actually just lowered all of our prices. So I think it's $22,149 now. You'd have to check the website. I'm still getting used to the prices because we just
over $2,000 roughly.
Yeah. For 8 channels at 500 watts into 4 ohms. And then when you really get into, if you really want a great LCR setup, or you're into 2-channel stereo, we got like the Purifi. So you can get a 2-channel Purifi, which is one of the best measuring, and I'll say sounding, but you're splitting hairs at a certain point, but it is the best measuring module. A 2-channel for that is $1,095. And that will compete with kind of anything out there. I've had a few people, Ryan's one of them, has our the Purifi, the higher power module, the 7040, which a monoblock for that is about $950. And we just revamped it with a new power supply to really push out as much power as you can get out of it. But those, I've had a bunch of customers who've used those monoblocks and replaced some really high-end Class ABs they've had in their setup, and have only ever had good things to say about it. So there's a good range in there. And I can tell you, anything you pick, you're at levels of signal to noise ratio and distortion, even with that entry level 252, that are astounding for the price.
Nice.
His amps are one of the only amps that are not pro amps that are able to drive my speakers at high volume. If that says anything.
You've got a unique setup with yours, Ryan. Your biggest issue is, I mean, you got lots of
Those
issues,
guys.
but your biggest issue with your speakers is they dip down to some really, really low impedance. I mean, we're talking just barely over 0 ohms, like point something ohms, right?
Correct. They dip to under half an ohm if you're at higher frequencies, if you're playing at high volumes, and they can and will push amplifiers into protection. But the Purifi modules that Dylan offers, the 7040s, are able to handle the load and more at tremendous power ranges. So I have no problem
right here. Is that the monoblocks?
Yeah.
Pull that up. You guys can kind of take a look here. So kind of no frills amplifier. I mean, you're not looking to make something gorgeous like a Macintosh amp, but that allows you to have a price point much lower than those as well.
It does. And the case manufacturer use actually allows a lot of customization that if you go to our customization page, there's different color choice, a lot of different color choices you can do, a lot of different anodizing.
And on this right here?
That's a gallery. So that's what some customers have had so far. So that's some ideas. But you can do two tones. Like I have one coming up where a customer is once bronze for half of it and black for the other half and anodized. But this one wanted a nice red and black. The yellow and black kind of looks nice. It's a little bit of a bumblebee look, but these are all ones that customers have custom ordered.
That's awesome.
But this case manufacturer has this huge catalog for custom manufacturing. So I do still get to this day people who say, I really like your amps, but I like to put mine on a shelf for people to see. Yours isn't, doesn't look as good as the competitors. And yes, it doesn't. But on the flip side, it's not just a black or silver case. Like, yeah, you can make a black or silver case like everyone else look great and put a lot of money into it. But at least for mine, like I said, you can have a color combination that no one else does.
Well, you're going to pay for that case.
And you're going to pay for the case. Yeah.
And I don't think people realize that when a case is manufactured or when anything's manufactured, you're not just going to get that increase in cost of whatever the manufacturing is. It's going to be increase in shipping, increase in manufacturing itself, increase in development. I mean, there's all different kinds of things that go into that. And so any increase at all at the base level is felt exponentially up the signal chain.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I guess this is kind of like a question. So Chris asks, can you mentioned an 8-channel amplifier. Yeah. Of course, that should be able to be great for Atmos, for maybe 4 bed layer speakers, like your surrounds, and then 4 Atmos. That'd be good for that.
So, and you can mix and match. So in our 8-channel chassis, you could do 4 channels of the high power if you really want your surround speakers, bed layer, higher power, and then you can do 4 channels of the lower 252 module, save some money and do less power because you don't need that much for your Atmos. So there's a lot of customization there. The most popular right now for home theater seems to be, since we brought the prices down and just had a sale also, is a lot of people like to do the 3-channel Purify for their LCR and then fill everything else in with the MP series Hypex, which have worked. I mean, that's what I have in my setup, and it works great.
They work great for me. I'm running 24 channels of that for my surrounds. That's weird for me to say.
You've mentioned one thing I try to do with the channel is make sure that, there are a lot of people that have questions just like I do. So my general question is, you've thrown 2 terms around quite a bit. Walk us through on what is the difference between Hypex and Purify?
Well, before we get there, what made you decide to go the Hypex route? When you were starting your business, what made you choose these modules over something else?
Because I had used them personally and heard them and just knew what they could do. As I said, I had used many different class AB up until the point I used my first Hypex. Statement amps from Anthem, Sunfire, Parasound, Emotiva, Outlaw. I have so many different ones. I would always be on the buy sell forums on AVS. Just, hey, what's a new used one I could try? And then I heard the Hypex and I was like, this is great. And I had actually, right before that, I had trialed a Pascal Class D, which the Pascal modules are another brand. They have a lot more power, but they comes at a trade of a lot more distortion compared to Hypex or Purify. And even that didn't really do it for me. And then I heard the Hypex, I was like, all right. And those MP modules were the perfect fit to offer the community because you can build them very quickly. They're not very expensive, but they have phenomenal performance. And then building off of that, I finally, when the business got successful enough around this time last year, is when we were like, all right, well, let's step up and now offer the Purify to kind of give a little bit more of a jump, especially for those stereo and 3-channel listeners.
Right.
But back to your point with the Hypex versus Purify. So Hypex was originally started by a man named Bruno. He designed, Hypex wasn't just started by him. His design, Hypex had been around, and they had, before the Encore series, they had their own Class D going on, and their latest one before Encore, which is what they call their what they called their revolutionary Class D design. They had these UCD modules class that was pretty good. They still had some distortion. And then Bruno was part of designing their Encore line. So that's their NC 500, not the NCX 500, but their older NC 500, NC 400, and their what eventually became their MP series, which is what I use. And that finally turned the tables for Class D, where people are like, all right, they can compete, they can measure great, they sound great. But then he left and founded Purifi. And then Purifi was his newest design. So Hypex was kind of his start with the Encore, saying, here's how we can take Class D and make it on the path to greatness. And then his Purifi, the Egantact is what they call it. So Hypex calls theirs Encore. That's their technology. Purifi calls theirs Egantact. That was his next step of like, all right, well, let's make it even better and start chasing down how low can we get with distortion? How low can we get with, or high can we get, signal to noise ratio? And then that's where the kind of that split is. And then more recently, Hypex responded with their own version of kind of, hey, let's chase down those numbers with their new NCX. So they call it their Encore X. So that's their next evolution of the Encore line. And that one measures, when people ask me, this is the question I get the most now is, hey, I'm looking at, your 2-channel Purifi or your 2-channel Hypex NCX 500. They're both the same price. Which one should I get? You're not going to hear the difference. I'm never going to sell people on buying an amplifier just to get more money. You will not hear the difference between an Encore X or a Purifi. The Encore X does have slightly better signal to noise ratio and distortion when you measure it. But you're already at levels of 106, 110 decibels, negative 106, negative 110 decibels of distortion measured that you can't discern that difference. So we're basically at this point, we're chasing the manufacturers, Purifi and Hypex are chasing who can get the lowest numbers, but actually listening to it, you're at a level where unless you have some golden ears that have never been found before, you can't really pick up on it. And it's going to be interesting because Purifi at Munich High End just unveiled their newest module, and they call it their Egantact 2. So it's their evolution of their original. Encore X is the newest Hypex. So this is now Purifi's newest evolution of their technology. And its numbers are even lower with distortion and signal to noise ratio. But again, we're at levels of like, the only thing that matters now is the power difference. So between your Purifis, you have the ET400 and the ET7040 right now. The difference, you're not going to hear a difference the way those measure or anything, but what you will get is power. And it's not just watts, but current. So like the 7040 and why it works great for Ryan's setup, is you have over 40 amps of current. So you're not just giving it wattage, but you're providing this current that when his speakers dip really low, they're able to, they won't go in a clip. They won't go into protection. They're able to pump out that power and hold it without,
950 watts at 2 ohms. Holy cow.
For a
so,
really
like I said,
small
when
chassis.
when someone comes to me and says, hey, what do I choose? Anything you choose is going to be phenomenal for your setup. Then you just start getting into, do you need this extra current or power because your speakers are hungry? Or are you okay with the 400A? And again, I try and steer my customers to what fits their scenario without taking money from them that I don't need to, because I don't try and tell people, hey, just get the 7040 because it measures higher with more power, because I don't want to take their money from them if it's not going to make a difference to them.
Well, a little bit ago, you mentioned that the different levels of Hypex amplifiers, and you said that Hypex's new version is the NCX. So can you tell us a little bit about what the difference is between NC and the NCX platforms? And then I guess diverge from that, what the difference maybe in the different Purifi platforms is?
So the NCX is, for the most part, they call it X amount better measuring compared to their NC, which was their NC 500. So it does measure better, has better distortion, better signal to noise ratio. Actually, some of the best emitters measured, but again, we're at levels that you won't hear. But what it does come with is better, obviously more output. So you got 700 watts into 4 ohms and 2 ohms. But it also has right there that high current output. So you get 28 amps of current output, which is more than the NC500. So again, it's just, I recommend when people ask me, this is another good one that if you have some fairly difficult, not, 0.3 ohms like your speakers, but if you have, speakers that dip around 2 ohms down to 2, maybe a little right under 2, the NCX is going to be a better choice because it, within the Hypex line, because it has that extra current with it and the extra power. And that's kind of the same with the Purifi. So you have the Purifi ET400A and the Purifi 7040, and your big difference there is not just wattage output, but current output. So as you can attest, that 7040A with its extra current output is, if it's driving 0.3 ohms, there's really nothing left on the market that I think you could throw at it,
right,
to prove that it's capable.
So lots of power, low
Yes.
distortion, high current, so signal to noise ratio. I'm not super familiar with that. You want that number high, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where one of the issues, one of the big things with Class D before the, before the Hypex Encore revolution back in about 2015, the signal to noise ratio was kind of the thing that people pointed to the most with Class D at the time, because like you could go out and buy Crown amps that were Class D, get a lot of power, but when you hook any speaker up to it, even if it's a, just a decent sensitivity speaker, you'd hear that hiss from it. It wouldn't be clean. The sound floor wouldn't be the best,
right.
Which is also why a lot of Class D was regulated to car audio, mainly subwoofers, because that you wouldn't hear it then. And then now the Class D, as you can see, their signal to noise ratio is so phenomenal. They're a lot of people use them like when they get a 2-channel Purifi. I've had a lot of people use them as near field monitors for even mixing. So they're sitting a foot away and they don't hear anything. It's dead silent when there's no music playing.
So Dylan, you've mentioned quite a bit about Class D. I know that was one of the questions that came up earlier. Somebody that joined us late in the stream. The most common typically is like your AB. We know we have A, which is usually runs really hot, really expensive. So most guys have AB, but we're seeing this trend with a lot of manufacturers shifting over to these Class D. What are some of the benefits of a Class D over? And again, maybe we don't hear a difference, but I think there's some physical characteristics of what Class D has to offer. And back in the day, Class D was garbage. But now it's like you got people like Amir that are measuring these and audioholics that are measuring them and going, this stuff's the real deal nowadays. And so what we're creating today in Class D is not the old school Class D.
No.
So kind of tell us a little bit about that.
So the biggest thing, the two biggest things right off the bat with Class D is weight, which for most people, a lot of people, maybe it doesn't matter because if you found a spot for your 98-pound Class AB,
yeah, it's there.
Okay. But weight's a big one because I've had a lot of people that it seems now a lot of people are getting more into embracing multi-channel. I think that's a big thing that's helped is before, if someone had a 5-channel surround on a huge Class AB, it's kind of like 4K TV. There's been a lot of holdouts maybe. And now people are like, all right, well, maybe I want to add another set of speakers or Atmos. And then they start looking at, well, I need room, especially if you're in a rack and you're saying, I got to add 4 more channels of amplification. How do I do that?
Right.
Extremely lightweight and extremely efficient, so you get less heat output.
Yeah.
They still will get hot, and as Ryan can attest, especially when you're driving speakers, there's still thermodynamics come into play that when you're pushing really hard speakers, they're still going to get hot. But by and large, for the normal usage, you can throw I always tell people ventilation is best for long-term for longevity, but for just any day usage, compared to Class AB, you could take a Class D amp, a good one, put it in a stand and never have to worry about, like, you could put it. I've had some people, I tell them if you can avoid it, do it. But I've told them if this is the only thing you can do. Some people have put their Class D amp from me on top of a receiver or a processor and not have any issues.
Yeah.
So the heat output and then the efficiency with the heat output also comes less power bill. So even in idle, because some people do like to leave their equipment on all the time. In idle, they're not going to draw much if anything.
Right.
And it does come in a better, like one thing I was asked recently was, well, how do they handle dynamics? Because I guess that's another thing people have with the Class.
Okay.
the thing there is when people think Class AB, they think a huge toroidal, like, hey, all this massive power. So there's always power on demand. And then for some reason, those same people think with Class D, you got your switching power supply. It's this nice little small, like tiny power supply. How can it provide 700 watts dynamically? Like they actually picture it like old car audio days where you had to use huge capacitors to keep up with the demands. I was like, no, that's not where we're at anymore. Like those, in terms of dynamics, these amplifiers are going to hit every note that your amplifier could before, but they're more efficient. So you're going to waste less electricity and also have less heat for the same output. Those are like the big, besides the sound difference possibly, because amplifiers can sound different when distortion comes into play. Okay. So if you're pushing a Class AB amp to its limit and you keep hitting that protection or that limiter, or it's overheating and it has its own protection, or it's just clipping, that distortion can change how it sounds or even lead to what people refer to as fatigue. Right. So if you get an amplifier that can put out clean sound, a lot of it, not hit your protection or over limit or shut down even, obviously you're going to have a lot better of an experience sound wise. Right.
I'll be honest, from a consumer standpoint, I appreciate the way that you approach this whole thing, because unfortunately, a lot of manufacturers, they will tell you like our amps do this and they present the sound stage in this way. And it, and they throw all this nice, for lack of a better word, fluff. And it's like, you're saying, look, you're not going to hear much difference between these amplifiers. And that's been my experience when I've reviewed different amplifiers. I don't think I could tell you the difference in a blind test if I was listening to a B&K or a Parasound or a Monolith or whatever. Yeah. But where you mentioned you're going to hear some differences is when you're driving them and they're running out of gas.
If you do a blind AB of good amplifiers that are performing within their specs, you won't hear a difference. Yeah. A true blind. There's some people who will say they did it, but they obviously switched the cables themselves. Our minds, no matter what, are always going to have some bias. There's always a bias there. 100%. But if you do a blind AB and the amplifiers are working within their limits, sound the same. It's when you push them to their extremes that you're going to start noticing that if you have an amp that's pushed to its max, or like you could have a Class AB that's rated 350 watts continuous, but that rating even for continuous is predicated on heat. So even like the Hypex amps, they give it in the manual, here's what it can do continuous up to a certain heat point, but because it's better at efficiency, you can stave off reaching that point for longer. So you can get a lot more out of it compared to just a decent Class AB that, you're pushing the same amount of power, but then once you push it for too long, if the heat can start bringing down the power draw, so now you're asking it, that's where you start getting distortion and clipping without noticing that the amp itself is clipping. It's kind of, you're asking it to do a lot, but internally it's throttling itself because it can't keep up with the power demand because it's overheating. Gotcha. That's something different from it just going into protection. And then eventually it will probably go into protection. Sure. But you're right. If they're performing within their specs, modern amps. So I didn't grow up with them. I've never heard them, but I know enough people like tube amps. You can have a warm sound from certain amps, but that's its own thing. And a lot of that is, well, for example, I'll give you, since we're on the topic, like the Purifi amps need what we call a buffer stage. Okay. And on my amps, it's built in. It's an OPA 1612 buffer. It's tried and true, measured. We designed our buffer stage to emulate the Purifi reference buffer that they send out to people to test, because that's the one that measures the best. But when you go to some other people who offer it, they'll tell you, like there's one that says they advertise as Class A sound in a Class D amplifier. And how they advertise that is because when they make their buffer stage, there's third-party buffers that are tailored to sound a certain way. Okay. And so you will hear a difference, but it's not what you're supposed to hear. That's what I tell people. I said, the people that designed the Purifi, for example, Bruno, what they intended to do was to take the sound that's coming to it, amplify it, and pass it without doing anything to it. That's what an amplifier should do. Yeah. So when companies advertise a certain sound, they're not wrong if they're trying to purposely change it, but then people have to realize, well, they're purposely changing it. And one way to do that, that Amir has shown, is some of these third-party buffer stages actually introduce quite a bit amount of distortion. That's one way you can actually change the sound.
Right.
So in a nutshell, it's basically you're taking something that's meant to perform transparently, is what I say, and purposely changing it, and then you're advertising, hey, this is what it sounds like. And if you want something that sounds like, I mean, I've had quite a few interested customers always ask, hey, can I change your buffers because X competitor allows it, and I really want that tube sound. And I'm up front with them and said, no, I designed these.
Right.
These are meant to sound the way they were designed, and that's transparent.
Sure. Yeah. Ideally, like you said, you just want it to pass that information. You don't want it to modify the sound signature. You want it to kind of preserve whatever is coming from the signal and then being passed on to the speakers. And then the speakers are going to have their own kind of characteristic, but you're not wanting to alter that in the process in the middle.
So going on back on why I asked you why you chose the Hypex and the Purifi modules, what made you decide to go down this path of price for performance as opposed to what a lot of other companies do with higher margins and other things in the marketplace?
I'm not gonna say, maybe it's part of my, I guess, character, but it's just, as someone in the hobby, I was discouraged when I was looking around that half of it, before I decided to build my own, besides looking at the one other manufacturer in the US, I had looked at some of these European ones, and I got discouraged. I was like, there's all this marketing. At this point in my life, I had known what marketing fluff was and snake oil, especially when we get into cables and stuff like that. So I'm reading this, I was like, that doesn't sound right to me, that, there's this sound this buffer can give you in this one. And it kind of got frustrating, where I was like, I just got the sense that these other people was just marketing to make a little more money. And to me, that always rubbed me the wrong way. Because then once I found out what the price was to build one of these and what other people were charging, it just made sense to me that, all right, well, here's the margins that I want to hit, because that's, I think, fair to me, but I don't need to double those margins. That, I don't know. It's just not who I am, I guess. I mean, that's just me being honest.
Sure. And I think it comes from you being that enthusiast yourself,
right?
Trying to meet a need for your own setup. And you're like, okay, I can actually make a really great product, mark it up some, make a profit because you're a business, but not gouge people in that process as well, which is super cool.
And that's why when I tell people I was tailoring to the community, like the DIY community. The idea was, when I first started, was get people access to these amps without breaking the bank. Because these are people that if I try to charge what other people were, they were going to keep saying, no, why would I pay that? So, and it's I do have some people that sometimes that have come to me and said, I mean, I've had some people ask, like, why are yours so cheap? And then I just start explaining to them what the differences are. And they're like, oh, that's just so simple. And it should be. You shouldn't have to wonder, like, why is this company charging $2,000 for this 2-channel? And then you look at the specs and it's, binding post that add an extra, like, there's some people that use binding posts that add an extra $150 to the cost. Right. Just because of the binding post material. Like, I was at a time in AVS where people would do tests with clothes hangers as speaker wire and show that it could sound the same as any other. So when I see people like, oh, well, you pay this extra and we'll use true silver solder, or we'll use silver cabling internally, I'm like, that's just someone trying to get money from people. I don't like that.
Well, and the other problem I have with it is, how do you verify that unless you take the product apart?
That's you make a good point. Like, you just have to go and trust. That's another thing is, like, a lot of people, even when Amir does reviews, which I like, he'll do the teardowns, and I just got into the habit, when I take pictures of all my products, I always take internal pictures that try and allow people to show, like, here it is. Like, I'm not trying to hide anything. Here's what you're getting. Here's the layout. And I know there's some where you'll kind of get generic, like this is what maybe it might look like. And then I don't know, transparency is key to me. And that kind of came up when we had back in December, a slight issue with our Purifi rollout. And
you did very well with that, by the way.
Yeah. And it was like, once it was found, it's like, no, we're going to handle, like, I wanted the community to know, like, we're going to handle it. No one's going to be left in the dark. Like, transparency is one of the best things to be if you're a business, is not trying to hide stuff.
Now, is that the same that was referenced in Amir's article?
Yeah. So what that ended up being,
I was looking at the review, and he was like, commended you. He's like, it's great to see such responsive companies such as Buckeye that take the results of a review and instantly jump on the issue identified to resolve it. Yeah.
And it turned out and to remind people, we had actually done our own testing up to that point. It was just a series of unfortunate events with 2 different people's test equipment that it wasn't caught completely. What it turned out to be is, and it never affected the sound. But what it turned out to be is you don't want magnetic materials, magnetic metal, in the pathway after, in the actual audio pathway. So you want it in, the ground pathway, stuff like that. So the binding posts I use are non-magnetic, but the tab that actually screws to the post turned out to be steel, and it's not advertised. It was never advertised to me by the manufacturer or anything. So it wasn't until we got this precise measurement, and then we hunted it down, that we're like, wait a second, if we bypass this tab and then we switch to brass. And it turns out what it comes down to when I explain this to people is, you never would have heard it, but what it shows is that when you're at this level of distortion, the tiniest little thing can kind of throw it off. And the whole idea was, when people ask me, if you can't hear the difference, why did you even bother to fix it? And it's like, well, because it's supposed to at least measure. We have other measurements on the market. We want to show that ours can measure just as good. And even though it took us a couple, like 2 months and a lot of emails to keep customers like, here's what's going on, we just felt it was best to match what it should measure at the end of the day, even if it might not affect the performance.
Yeah, and I applaud you guys for getting out in front of that and being transparent, because so few manufacturers and vendors and companies do that. And I think once you do that, you really gain a lot of people's trust, because customers know that you have their best interests at heart instead of just trying to be predatory and go after their wallet. So I really applaud you for doing that, because it's hard to do. I mean, you're effectively risking your brand in doing that, but you're putting the customer first before anything else. And at the end of the day, if you get out ahead of things, it ends up working out in your favor.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing. Like Ryan said, when you mess up, just own up to it. Make the necessary steps to make the correction. And I think that transparency goes a long way. And like you said, that develops trust between the community as well as your customers and even future customers. I mean, make somebody want to buy from a customer or from a company that they can trust, that isn't going to just blow some smoke and, and mislead them or take, cut corners or not do something that isn't in their best interest, but really pads the pockets of the brand. And so that's pretty awesome, man. Appreciate that.
And being owner operator, the customer service emails was me. So you also knew you were talking to the person that was going to get it fixed. So that is the one thing that's still, I'm sure one day I'll have to get an employee or two if the way it keeps growing. But that's one thing I like about this is I still get to be hands on everything. And it is fun. I mean, people ask me, for the margins, my margins are, I mean, I won't get into them, but they allow me to live and have it, I mean, make some money. But it's, again, when people say, well, look who, X is twice as much, as like, but they're probably approaching it as just straight business. I said, this is actually fun for me because it's a job that I enjoy. I don't mind emailing. I mean, some people will see that I'll be on the forums even late at night, still answering questions or emails or, but it's fun to get up, answer some emails, and then I work in front of my nice setup, so I get to put on the latest show, and I just get to build amps for people and have some fun. So there's no reason to. I guess I don't mind. I like the quantity rather than the money. I think I like putting out more, even if the margins are a little less, because it keeps me busy.
Yeah.
And it's part of the hobby.
Yeah. And it allows you to fly that private jet to Mwave this year, which I'm excited about that, man. So Dylan and Buckeye are going to be at Mwave this year, and we are less than 2 months away. So I'm super pumped about
don't
that.
remind me.
So Ryan's stressing. I'm excited. I'm the hype man. I just pump everybody up. Ryan's like, oh gosh, I got to figure out how to make this thing work and all these pieces. He sends me this astronomical quote / not really invoice, but quote from some stuff that we need. He's like, look at this. And I look at it, I'm like, this lady's on crack, man. There's no way, man. Holy cow, we won't even make that.
I'll just tell everybody what it was. It was a rental company.
Yeah.
Wanted $45,000 to rent Pipe and Drape.
Pipe and Drape, just so that we could
to rent it.
Curtains.
I wouldn't even get to own it.
Right.
To rent it.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Holy cow! Like, she's on crack, man. So no, we definitely won't be able to do that. We don't make that much probably in the whole event, man. It's crazy. So we will be we'll figure it out though. So,
Yeah, I'm Mwave. Yeah, I'm just more trying to get ready, but again, being the one person business, it's just hard to I don't know how many people I'll wow, but maybe at least being there, get to connect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, we're excited, man. We're super excited for the event itself and the fact that you're going to be there as well. Well, we've actually got quite a few comments. If you don't mind, questions. So if you don't mind, we'll go ahead and jump through some of those. JD the Expert, this is actually from, oh my goodness, I just drew a blank. I can see the picture. Worldwide Stereo. A long time ago, they sent it to me. So I think you can order them on their website. Question for Dylan. Matt says, in the new Encore X, is the new Encore X a major step up in sound quality? I think we talked about that earlier, or just more of a step up on the spec sheet over the NC 502MP. Just want to see if upgrading to the X series worth the money.
If your setup, this is where I kind of parse. If you were asking between Encore X and Purify, no. But he's asking about the MP series. Mm-hmm. If your usage is home theater or just normal, no. Okay. Where you can hear a difference, where you're likely to hear that difference and the money might be well spent, is if you're a critical listener of music. So you're one of those people who you love your music and you can put on most of what you put on, you know how it should sound. You like to get lost in it. Like those people that you know how everything should be played out, how the sound stage should be, all that. You're likely to hear a little bit of a difference. And I say a little bit, like maybe if I had to put a percentage on it, 5-7% better. Mm-hmm. But again, that's where we're at these levels. Is it worth spending the money? Mm-hmm. That's a hard one because some people are always going to, I could tell them, no, it's not. But some people are going to have that itch in their head. We're like, oh, it's the newest thing. So that's where I try and be honest. Like if you have the setup that you're sitting down and you're listening to the same song for the 50th time, mm-hmm. yeah, you might be able to pick out a little bit better of a difference, especially at higher volume is where that NCX would come into play. Okay. But for average usage or for even high-end home theater usage, no. And you'd be amazed how many people ask me if I'm ever going to do like a 7-channel Purify for home theater. And I keep telling them, I know others offer it, but that's where I get into this thing of, well, that's a lot of wasted money for bed layer speakers other than your front. Like I know people want to spend the money, but I'm hesitant to just do it because you're not going to hear that difference.
Sure.
And I do want to caution people in that regard too, that what can happen a lot of times when you do subjective reviews, if you're not doing them back to back in instantaneously switching, you can convince yourself that, oh, I need to listen for something. And if you're critically listening to something, you may hear something that you have never heard before, but it may have always been there. You just may have never noticed it. Right. So it's really important when you do these that you have a fast enough A/B comparison to switch back and forth. And ideally, you'd want to do it blind. Yeah. And then even more ideally, you'd want to do it double blind. Right. So it's the more you can take the subjectivity and the bias out of it, the more objective you can be, the better the results at the end of the day you're going to have, which is going to lead you to better and possibly cheaper outcomes.
Yeah,
sure. So along that line, you'd mentioned, you've got an 8-channel amplifier. So for guys like me and others that have high speaker count, 11 channels or more, have you considered doing like a big multi-channel amp so that you don't take up so much space?
That would be very big.
Yeah.
Would it be?
So
Okay.
yeah, the 8-channel 502 fits
Actually,
in a 17-inch wide
You're
chassis.
a big boy.
Yeah. And that's with the modules sideways. So that's
It's
two
called a
reasons we did that.
502.
One, sideways allowed us to put heat sinks on them.
Okay.
But two was when they're
okay.
sideways, you can fit more of them in there. So
Never mind.
yeah, if you wanted to do 10-channel,
Okay. So that's an 8-channel amplifier.
You wouldn't
then.
fit it in
so
the pack.
I've
Wow.
always wanted to try and stay at 17-inch wide, because if you can't, even if you don't have rack ears, 17-inch wide is the normal for a rack shelf.
Okay.
And most cabinetry.
Sure.
So I can do a higher channel count, but then it would be in an amplifier that's going to be at least 22 inches wide for 10-channel. So it's kind of, it's a weird.
Just run multiple chassis.
Okay.
Yeah. And you
Like
can.
I said, I didn't know it was that packed in.
No, it's and like if you do like the 8-channel NC252 fits in a chassis that's not as high. So you can do two of those and actually put like a AC Infinity on top of one and then stack the other on top of that. So because like I said,
so these are low profile. I see.
Oh yeah, and this one only weighs about 14 pounds, so it's easy to stack them together.
So use that, put an AC Infinity to keep this one cool. Point that
you could put another one on top of it.
That in front of or back or whatever. Just don't buy the AC Infinity that shoots it up, because
Also keep in mind that all of these amps that Dylan offers, it's rated power per channel. It's not I'm going to get 16 channels of 100 watts or whatever AVR power where it's, I don't know, X amount, and then it's sharing the power supply. So the more channels you put on it, the lower the power is going to be delivered. This is, if it's an NC502, it is the rated power, or in this case, a 252. It's 250 watts at 4 ohms. That's what it's delivering per channel. It's not sharing the load between those two channels, even though they're on the same chassis. It's the same per channel. So keep that in mind. That's a big reason why these are so large, is because there's not really an offering that's really small, that's like 50 or 100 watts. The lowest offering I think here is the 252.
For me, they do make a smaller module, but then that's mainly for, that one's more tailored for if someone's doing active speakers and really just wants like the mids or highs. It's not the best for home theater if you're trying to fill everything out. So but even that module, it's not much smaller. It still has a pretty decent footprint for even less power. So,
so this would go along. I see there's XLR on the rear. So there was a question here. Are any of these fully balanced?
Yeah. So fully, the Purifi and the new Encore X are, and that it more refers to the internal topology. So you can have an amp that has XLR, so it's balanced inputs, but the actual amplifier technology, the topology within it might not be fully balanced. But the Encore, the Hypex and the Purifis, yes, they are. And that's one thing especially Purifi makes good note of that to remind people that it is. Which is another reason why I do get the question a lot, why don't I offer RCA inputs? Because Hypex and Purifi will say, they even have, Hypex has a white paper on it, that even if your source is unbalanced, the best connection to their amps are still to use an XLR in and just use an RCA to XLR cable, not an adapter. Don't use an adapter ever, because that'll bring your output level down, but the cable.
So that's, you can get a cable. That's all right. That's good to know.
And I have that like in my frequently asked questions on my website, because it comes up a lot. But yeah, a simple cable. And Hypex basically says that's the best way to preserve as much of the balanced topology internally versus just doing RCA to RCA. Okay.
Very cool. Another question here. John says, any plans to use the Hypex Neeli modules?
So no, those are for the do-it-yourself market. So, and that's no, and the other reason why is because those modules aren't like they have a stereo kit for that, but that's kind of, as Ryan just brought up, whereas like the MP series your power is per channel. If you do the Neli and do the stereo kit, you actually are having the power per channel. And again, those you can buy directly as those are basically like if someone wants to get into the do-it-yourself family, you can buy them directly from Hypex. So it's not something I would assemble or sell because it's just not, there's no markup I can do on it anyways, because you can buy it yourself.
Okay. Chris has a question. He says, took notice of the custom build section here. Any thoughts of being able to do switchable by amp capability?
So no, but in my frequently asked questions, there's actually an easy way you can bi-amp these and make it switchable without an actual switch. So for like the 252, all you need for the Hypex is, just in layman's terms or in simple terms, you just need an XLR splitter. So if you want to do channel 1 and 2 and bridge them, you'd have an XLR splitter, and on one of those splits, you would just switch pin 2 and 3, so the hot and cold, so it's out of phase, and that way nothing internally has ever changed, no wiring's ever changed. And if you ever want to bridge it, you would just use this splitter. You're done. And then if you ever want to unbridge it, you just use normal XLR cables. So that just makes it simple. And I've always tried to avoid switches whenever possible in the signal pathway, just to kind of avoid a little extra possible ground interference. Anytime you have a switch in a pathway, it can add a little bit of distortion, or possibly, or add a source of maybe ground issues, stuff like that. Okay.
Is that the answer right there?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I made there's even a little diagram if you follow that to the ASR.
Nice.
The easy way to do it, if this is something you want to do, is Blue Jeans Cable will actually do it for you. You just buy a normal XLR splitter, and in the note you say wire one leg out of phase, and then you're done.
Okay. Nice. See, learn some new stuff.
But I have to remind people then, if you bridge the Hypex modules, you cannot go below 4 ohm, because now they're seeing the load together. So if you have, whereas the modules per channel can do 2 ohms, you bridge them, now you can only go 4 ohms, and that's even pushing it.
Okay. So there's some limitations there. Don't just think you're getting more power there.
No, I had a customer when I first started who did a subwoofer, and I told him that, and he must not have believed me, because it was a 2 ohm subwoofer, and the amp lasted for a decent amount of while, but even that drew the Hypex, the MP Series 1, that finally caused it to give out, because that is a lot to ask of it.
Herc Driver says, going to get one of those NC 502 MPs, so he's going to be selling his Emativa. Sounds cool, man.
I appreciate it. I'll look forward to that.
Worth it.
Yeah. Chris says, what speakers and amps do you use on your setup, Dylan?
Well, so amps are right now I'm doing all 502s in my, this is now I'm calling my living room setup. Actually downgraded this setup this time last year to self-fund our Purifi startup. I didn't want to take out a business loan. So I used to have a really nice Revel Berylliums, a Funk subwoofer, Trinov and Kaleidoscape, some fun stuff. Sold it all. So now it's a little more simple. It's some Paradigm, their new Premier line, which has, I started off Paradigm in this hobby when I first started. So I always loved them. But now they're back to, I think it's one of their founders or the son of one of their founders is now back in the company. So it's bringing them back to how they used to be. Because for a while they did have a house sound in their speakers that wasn't that great. So it's just Purifi or Paradigms up front, just some golden ears in the back so I could add in, you can kind of see them here. I used to have in walls behind me, but it relegated me to a 5.1 setup. So I did these to do a 7-channel bed, and then I have golden ears Atmos. But what's fun and coming up is, and I've been buying secondhand, so I got lucky with a lot of it, but I have a theater build. There's actually a page on AVS in their theater building section where I'm documenting what I'm doing.
Yeah, the construction.
The construction section. But that's going to end up being 2 rows, 160-inch 16:9 screen.
All right. Nice.
Behind it will be JBL cinemas. I got Funk subwoofers. It's going to be 7.7 bed and 6 overheads. So it's going to be a fun setup, and it's a JVC 7. My original plan, I'm sorry, Ryan, was to go through Ryan, but I just got lucky. Everything I wanted kept coming up used and in like great condition.
Do it.
And it ended up saving me enough money that I was even able to grab a nice used Kaleidoscape because I was debating going back to Kaleidoscape for the cost, but since I saved enough, but I'm excited to finally have a theater again. So that'll be my new setup, and that'll be driven by Buckeye Amps as well.
Very cool. Congratulations on that.
I heard you were going to use Emotiva or something.
Exactly. Got some.
I'll buy that 9-channel that's about to be up for sale.
There you are. That's for sure. Save some money. So Chris says, what does your shirt say?
So remember, kids, electricity. Electricity kills.
I love it. That I can totally see Chris rocking that shirt, man. Good dude. Chris is gonna be.
I like how it doesn't sugarcoat anything. It's just electricity will kill you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I wear shirts like this all the time, like funny ones, but this one is and my dad had to remind me, this used to be back in the day, not the guy holding a knife, but this is kind of how it was as a reminder to kids, like, hey, electricity will kill you. So it's kind of a play on that old,
right. So Kevin says, why don't home amplifiers have clip indicators like pro amps?
Well, mine do. So I'll plug that. So ours do have clip amp indicators. So that's one thing I kind of put on the description is because of the way, because of our input boards now that have an microcontroller, I do advertise that unlike most other manufacturers, the Class Ds that we use, ours will tell you clipping, an error indication. So if there's something else going on other than clipping, usually overheating. So you do get a little bit of feedback in that regard. Okay.
Miles says, how do we fix amps only being 70% efficient? Is there a way?
Well, Class D we're at 94, 95, such as the Purifi. So I don't know if maybe he's referring to like Class AB still being lagging behind.
Right. So there's
that. I don't think I don't think you can fix just by that it's
design.
The difference between the power supplies.
Sure. Big Swing says, that's how I found Buckeye. I was so confused as to why all the amps were $3,000 to $5,000 for a 2-channel amp. So he was looking for a youth man deal and he found you. Let's look here. Rasiki, he's had several comments in here. I don't know if you know him personally, but he said he was glad to have you on the stream, and he seems very familiar with your products. Trinov uses Hypex NC 1200 and puts a toroidal transformer instead of a SMPS and charges the premium.
That's what ATI does too. They use NC 500s, not the NCX and not the MP series. They use NC 500s and use a toroidal transformer. It's again sounds. You're gonna get the same sound, but it's just their approach to kind of have their own little touch to it, along with a premium price.
Sure. Let's see. Kevin has another one. Is it even possible to have a high power amplification, 300 watts or more, and have a SINAD measurement of 120 dB and above?
Yes. Well, okay. Of measurements on a mirror right now, I think where we're at with the NCX 500 that he measured was 116 decibels for distortion, or SINAD. Sorry, SINAD. But with the newest Purifi coming out, and Purifi, they've given hints at their measurements, and Purifi measurements have almost always matched what a mirror does because they don't sugarcoat it, they don't try and fluff it up. They're showing that we might be at about 120 or higher for SINAD at a module that's putting out well over 300 watts. And that, by the way, that puts out 700 watts. And like I said, that measurement, I believe, was 116. So yeah, we're almost at, and I have to remind people, when we look at SINAD, most people past 100, you can't hear that distortion.
Yeah.
Almost everyone past 100. There are some people out there who claim they have golden ears that can,
put those people in a double-blind A/B test.
That is not
fail
me.
every time.
That is not me for sure. So here you go. So he is a fan, man. Dylan's an unsung hero in home theater enthusiast community, as far as I understand.
He's Amp Jesus.
That's awesome, dude.
I appreciate it. I never expected to be this big, but that since from day one, it hasn't changed that my goals have always been to give a great performing product to the community and not fluff them up or steer them wrong or I try to never be subjective. Unless someone directly asks me what my thoughts are on something, I try not to, if someone says, hey, what should I get? I try not to subjectively say, oh, the Purifi is the best, get that. It's always try and tailor to what people tell me or what they give me their setups and then I try and tailor it to them.
So Scott asks, any chance of making a mono or 2-channel subwoofer amp?
Not really, not with these, because if it was another brand, maybe. I looked at Pascal once, but it's hard to make a subwoofer amplifier because there's already so many capable ones out there that it wouldn't make sense for me to make a subwoofer amplifier using a 7040 Purifi module that's going to cost how much money when you can go get 1200 watts of ice power for cheap, because that distortion difference doesn't make a difference for a subwoofer.
Right.
So if you have an ice power that's putting out, 90 decibels for synad versus a Purifi that's 100 at 110, that makes no sense. Like that price premium, it doesn't make sense when you're doing a subwoofer build.
So Big Swing says, are the NCX 500 shipping out soon? I can't wait to get mine. So he's already got his order placed.
So almost, I made a post in the owner's thread on ASR. I'm hoping to start shipping the next few days. We just had a little snag that we did all of our soft, since we use a microcontroller, one of the things we have is firmware for our boards that help with diagnosing the errors or reporting clipping and soft start, stuff like that. So when Hypex sent us the pre-production modules to get everything started and designed, we had everything tailored to those. And then I can't speculate why they did it or not, but when they actually made their production modules, they made changes to the software of their modules. So we've had to change our firmware, and we just want to run the firmware for a few more days to make sure everything's stable. There's no hiccups. As soon as we kind of verify that everything's good, then they're ready to start shipping.
Nice.
So again, that's another thing. I'm not trying to rush out a product until I know for sure that we're good to go.
And I think that's your customers I would much rather wait for something to be right and perfect than ship me something that I'm going to regret and have to send back and fix and have issues with it.
And that's where I won't say the company, because as an owner, it's not someone I directly compete with, but as someone in the enthusiast field, when I came up, there was a certain product I bought that, well, it actually happens a lot, especially with AV processors, but there was one I bought that was very clearly software-wise never ready, and I think to this day is still getting updates that, I've been there as a customer. It's not fun.
No,
it's maddening.
What about like bench testing? Where can people find some bench testing on your products?
The easiest is Amir ASR, because if
he's not thorough at all.
Yeah. If he tests a Purifi 3-channel, well, I mean, he tested mine, so you can see how ours do. But there's no deviation amp to amp for how it's going to sound for the same module when I build them. I do test every amp, at least audibly, to make sure there's no hums, no ground issues. And I do have my own bench set up to test, but I don't do it for every amp because it would get very redundant just to have the same certificate over and over and over.
Right. Any trades?
Not anymore so much. No. I thought about for a hot minute having like a used section on the site for stuff like that, but it just, for how small the business still is and kind of all the overhead, it's just not something I'm able to do.
A huge can of worms too.
I think it might have even been more of hey, Mike says he loves his Buckeye amp. Keep doing your thing, Dylan. I'll be purchasing the 6-channel Hypex 502 soon.
Look forward to it. And I always remind me if you're a repeat customer, because I usually try and give a little bit of a discount. It's nothing great, but just to acknowledge.
Super cool, man. Like 50% off, pretty good discount there. Let's see. Maybe one more question here, guys. Herc says, how long does it take for an order to ship? Typically, like what's our wait time on that?
As of right now, okay, typically it's about 10 days.
Okay.
I'm down to about 10 days, maybe 14. The only hiccup right now is filling all these NCX orders that have been pre-ordered while not letting a current customer's order get too far behind. So right now I'm pushing about 14 days, but I don't foresee it ever getting like it used to be when I got really busy this time last year.
Sure. Let's see. Claude's going to be at Mwave, so we're excited for him. He said he just recently bought the 8-channel, and I'm powering my bass layer with it, completely satisfied. That's great to hear, man.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, Herc says that's not bad. 10 days.
No, and yeah, 10 days. I still get some people though. I mean, I don't judge any customer. I still get some people that, how long is it? And I'll tell them it was like a month ago, 10 days. And they literally said to me, no, I need an amplifier right now. And I have to remind, like, in my mind, for our field, there's still a lot of back orders for a lot of products in the audio world. But I guess I'm one of those people, like, maybe if I can't judge someone's setup, but like, I could never see that, you know, waiting more than 10 days for an amplifier would be life or death. But I try and get them out as quick as I can.
Sure.
But I do remind people, like, there's some stuff, if you want certain things like a funk audio subwoofer, for example, that's like a 6-month wait. I'm never going to get to that point, but I try and keep people a little grounded that there are competitors out there that might be able to ship same day because they have stock. But
sure, absolutely, yeah, you can't expect that from one dude that's building them.
No, they're all built to order. So
yeah. One day he's gonna have a massive warehouse, and you guys can just call customer support, order it right then, text him your credit card number, boom, it's out the door, like, you know, like Amazon. You'll have it next day, but he's not there yet.
No, I did have someone ask on the last person I did an interview with, is Buckeye the next Emotiva in terms of, you know, will we have speakers or processors? No, I don't see that. But I have been teasing lately. We do have a new product that will be announced some point, probably at Mwave, but it shows that we're not just going to be in amplifiers, and we're not just going to be stagnant with, you know, waiting for stuff to come out and us build around it. We're kind of being proactive.
Love it, man.
Very exciting.
So I love what you're doing. And what's been cool is just hearing you talk, man. You know your stuff. Not only are you an enthusiast, but you're also an engineer. You've got the knowledge, you've got the understanding of it. Sounds like you're making an amazing product. Ryan owns these and has them in his setup, and his setup's pretty demanding.
That doesn't mean a lot.
What's that?
That doesn't mean a lot that I own them.
Well, I'm just saying that you
don't put me on the pedestal.
I'm just saying you have experience with them, you know, and so you've been valuable for them.
And so his front speakers are, that's and you use those for movies, not just music.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he does them stupid loud too. So I mean, it's like,
I know, I appreciate that.
He's not baby.
It was loud enough that when I told Martin Logan, they had to respond and make sure that it wasn't a typo. It works.
That's awesome, man. So a couple of things as we wrap up here. I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we're doing a giveaway for the Spears and Munsell disc. So you can check out how to enter at youthmanreviews.com/giveaway. Enter that. In 2 weeks, we'll be drawing that and announcing that, because we're going to have the owners of Spears and Munsell here on the show. So we're excited to have them in 2 weeks. And then, of course, you know, go check out Buckeye. See what Dylan has to offer. A lot of different variants, different styles, different budgets, different amplifier power capacity. And so I'm sure he's got something that'll meet your needs. Eric, appreciate the $10 super chat. Are there custom buffer section available for changing input sensitivity? My preamp signal is that's a comma. So 0.8 volts. Thanks guys for getting such a capacity in. Okay. Oh, okay, I got you. And unfortunately, joining late. So, what do you think about that?
Not for the gain, not like that. The gain stage itself would have to be changed with resistor, like that's soldered onto the board.
Mhm.
And I'm sorry, like that is a really low for a normal use case. That is pretty low for a pre-out voltage.
Okay.
That's really low.
Normally, like when we designed ours, 2 volts is kind of the standard. Receivers are usually 1.4 continuous. They can usually hit at least 2 max. Yeah, but 0.8 is just. I mean, that's low. But no, we wouldn't have any way to help with that. You can still use the amp. If you're at 0.8 and let's say for like the NC252, it needs about 1.6 volts to hit max. At 0.8, you would only be losing at the top 3 decibels. So in the grand scheme of things, you'd still get a lot of power of the amp. You'd only be down about 3 decibels max output. So it's not like you can't use the amp or still get great sound out of it.
So Dylan, Buckeye, we're going to have them at Mwave. They're also a silver sponsor of Mwave. So we're super grateful for you. Looking forward to hearing them and having them set up there so that you guys can check out firsthand. If you need anything on home theater, you definitely can email Ryan. Ryan, are you a dealer for Buckeye?
Yep.
So if you need any Buckeye stuff, hit Ryan up. He'll be glad to take care of you. In regards to Mwave, you can check out all the details, MidwestAVExperience.com, and definitely show Dylan some love at BuckeyeAmp.com. Dylan, it's been a blast, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
On. Love all the questions these guys have. And if you guys have any more questions, definitely hit Dylan up on the website. I believe you probably have a contact form or.
Oh yeah, contact form. And I also provide the email if you want to email directly. And for those that are on the major forums, they kind of know they can find me there too.
Very cool. Well, guys, like I said, in 2 weeks, we'll have Spears and Munsell on the show. So definitely be on the lookout for that. Next week, we'll be just answering your questions, home theater related. And so join us for that at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So hope you guys have an incredible week, man. And we will catch you next week. Thanks again, Dylan.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone.
See you guys later.